Good afternoon, good evening, colleagues, and welcome to this European Union side event on racing to 1.5 degrees, cities implementing evidence-based climate and energy action in Europe and the Mediterranean. I'm Andy Deacon, Acting Managing Director of the Secretariat team for the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, one of the co-organizing partners for this event. You'll hear from many other partners from across the region in a discussion panel that will form the main piece of this event, as well as an introductory keynote from the European Commission. This event is really taking stock of how local governments in Europe and the Mediterranean are accelerating climate action, are implementing science-based measures to fund a secure, resilient, and climate-neutral future. Select Global Covenant of Mayors, Cities and Regions will reflect on their evidence-based climate and energy plans and showcase how their ambition is turning into impact-driven success stories. The event is co-organized by GCOM, the largest alliance of local governments committed to climate action, two leading initiatives for climate action in the Mediterranean, and a pioneering municipality aiming to implement concrete and actionable sustainability goals towards net zero emissions. And there will be plenty of opportunities to interact with our audience through some polling and a chance for Q&A with our panelists, which will come later on in the session. So stay tuned for that, stay alert, and have your questions at the ready. But to kick us off and get us going, we're delighted to have an introductory keynote presentation from Henrika Trautmann, Acting Director of NEAR-B, the European Commission Directorate General for Neighbourhood and Enlargement Negotiations. So to get us started and to set the scene from the European Commission perspective, over to you, Henrika.
Thank you very much, Andy. Good evening, good afternoon to everybody. Good to see you, at least on the screen. I'm very, very happy to be here on behalf of the European Commission at this very, very interesting and important side event in the context of COP26. Thanks a lot for inviting us to give you a little bit of a view on how the European Commission is particularly looking at the role of local actors in climate and energy action in Europe and the Mediterranean. Maybe to start with, as you know, the EU has set out to be the first climate neutral continent in the world by 2050. And the European Green Deal provides the roadmap to achieve this ambitious goal, whilst also promoting sustainable, competitive and inclusive development. But to achieve this success on a global scale, the efforts of the EU alone are not sufficient, and we need to work hand in hand with our partners. And there, the Mediterranean region is a key partner for the EU, by virtue of its proximity, interdependence, and shared history. It is also one of the regions of the world that is most severely impacted by climate change. So therefore, it is very urgent for the region to cooperate for a green transition, build climate resilience, and shift towards sustainable, low-emission economies. The Union for the Mediterranean Ministers recently reaffirmed this urgency in the declaration adopted in Cairo on the 4th of October in the context of the UFN Ministerial Meeting on Environment and Climate Action. A declaration that took 2 years to negotiate, but we think it was definitely worth the time because it gives us a good platform for the Mediterranean region and the EU to come to the COP26 discussions in Glasgow with an ambitious approach. The EU adopted earlier this year the joint communication on a renewed partnership with the Southern Neighbourhood, where green transition is at the heart of the EU's engagement in our region. Equally, the EU adaptation strategy, adopted in February, puts upscaling adaptation efforts at the forefront of our climate action, both within the EU and outside EU borders. There, the key role that local governments can play in driving the green transition is very widely acknowledged. The European Green Deal and its external dimension require the active participation of cities and regions as crucial partners for enlisting support and ownership amongst communities and delivering results at the level that is closest to the citizens, and to make it much more manageable and graspable for citizens what a green transition actually can look like. Local governments are ideally placed to identify climate actions that best meet local needs. They also often have the mandate to undertake the investments needed to build climate resilience, although sometimes they may lack the technical know-how and financial resources required to do so. Our projects funded for the Southern Neighborhood have been consistently assisting local authorities in the South in the development and implementation of their sustainable energy and climate action plans, the CCAPs. And with climate in particular, we are also promoting local authorities' participation in the Global Covenant of Mayors Initiative for Climate and Emergency, the largest global alliance for climate city leadership. We will get to more details on the climate role later on in the program. The EU has supported the establishment of the GCOM's Mediterranean branch, known as the COMMED, which has been gaining increasing momentum in recent years. This, for us, is a proof of the growing interest and commitment by Mediterranean local governments in taking a leading role on climate action. We will hear a little bit more details on their role in the presentation indeed later. Now, currently, the EU is developing a new program called Climate for Cities, where we encourage local authorities to form partnerships with NGOs, academic institutions, the private sector, and financing institutions for the implementation of integrated local actions with demonstrable climate impact. In this program, the EU is using its financing contribution to leverage additional funds from public and private sources. This is a new pilot program. We will see how it will develop over time, but if it proves successful, there will be great scope for replication to show ways to channel funds available for climate action to those who actually can make good use of them and sometimes don't have the way to actually access these funds, which are available on an international level, but sometimes very difficult to get there. So we're working on bankable funding proposals. Looking beyond Climate for Cities, which is starting this year, for the future, we are now designing the projects for the period 21-27 funded by the EU. Funding for climate will be at the forefront of these activities. Although the precise delivery modalities are still to be defined, it is clear that we will continue to work with local authorities and civil society on climate action. We will also increasingly try to make use of the entire toolbox available for our cooperation between the EU and Southern Mediterranean countries, including the deployment of the new instruments such as the European Fund for Sustainable Development under the NDICI Global Europe funding instrument, which is a 40 billion framework initiative dedicated to support public and private investments in our partner countries. We have to move beyond giving only grants. We also have to bring in the private sector. We have to bring in the big banks to leverage the funding that is going to be needed to really establish a green transition. So on that, let me conclude by saying that as we begin to emerge from the COVID pandemic, we have to take the opportunity to build back better whilst leaving no one behind. The EU is committed to working with its southern neighbors on the road towards a successful green recovery and will continue engaging with local authorities as they are the key agents of change in this endeavor. With that, thank you very much for the invitation. Hope you have a very interesting panel discussion, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those opening remarks. And it's been great to hear not only in your presentation, but also through the course of the day in other events about both the increasing importance being given towards the points you made around upscaling of adaptation, and also to the point about leaving no one behind in the transition. And they are points that I'm sure that we'll come back to during our panel discussion. But thank you again for those opening keynote remarks on behalf of the Commission. So we said we would keep you on your toes, so let's come and do that. I'm joined by colleague Silvia Assolini from the Covenant of Mayors Europe, who is then going to lead us through a quick exercise just to get some audience feedback and get us going with a word cloud. So Silvia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Andy, and good evening, good afternoon to everybody that is here in the discussion as well as following the conversation. And actually is exactly to those latter ones that I'm addressing now, some indications. We would love actually to hear comments and thoughts and questions from you on the presentation that you are going to hear later on, and the opinion that everyone has among the ones that are on the line. For that, there is a Slido that we have been prepared for you. Since you are in the platform, if you scroll down on the left side, you will see this Slido level. By clicking on it, you will redirect magically to this word cloud. For those of you that doesn't know what a word cloud is, it's a way to display your opinion in a very graphical and appealing manner by creating this cloud where the size of the word depends on how the words, how many times actually the words have been typed in. So it gives you a bit of the feeling on of the pulse of the opinion that have been shared. And the other way that you can use to interact with us is the chat box that again is available on the platform, and it would be my pleasure to try to bring your voice to this conversation. Thank you, and over to Andy.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, and we look forward to some interaction as we work our way through the session then. Please, if you're watching or following along, make use of then that Slido link that's there and accessible from the control panel. So then to come to our discussion panel, we'll come to them one by one, ask them to introduce themselves, and we then have two rounds with each of our panelists of roughly 3 minutes each. So first, to hear from a mayor, we'll come to Mayor Paolo Micheli from the municipality of Segrate. Welcome. Would be great if you would say a few words perhaps to introduce yourself and say a little bit about the city and the sustainability planning that's underway in Segrate. So first of all, over to you for a few minutes.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you all for joining us today. We are very honored to be here. I'd like to start by introducing my city. Segrate is a medium-sized municipality located within the metropolitan city of Milan. And we are nicknamed the Green Hub of Milan for our extensive green assets. Despite the size, our city presents a unique European and international outlook. And it's marked by several major infrastructure, like the airport of Linate, for example, that project the whole area into a global dimension. Our city, like many others, is facing extremely relevant challenges that we are directing towards the ecological and energy transition. In recent years, however, the aggravated severity of the climate crisis has urged us to intensify our effort to ensure not only the implementation of impactful projects, but also the adoption of increasingly ambitious solutions for territorial resilience. In this direction, the role of policymakers and more broadly of the public sector is fundamental in orienting a sustainable urban development. Yet, this hasn't always been the case. In coping with the climate emergency, politics has been quite slow and shy in its response to the environmental crisis, when instead the catastrophic effects of climate breakdown demanded and still demand a radical change in politics that must be bolder, inventive, faster, and decisive. In orienting our ambitions and projects towards a climate neutral future, we have been heavily investing on both dimensions of sustainability. On one hand, the sustainability of the project, on the other, the sustainability of the process. For what concerns the first dimension, adaptation to climate change is taken as an opportunity to rethink the city spaces. In this case, the central node of our green transition strategy is the Green Kilometer project, which consists the transformation of an environmentally impactful infrastructure into a green highway. This project is expected to contribute to the goal of decarbonization by reducing CO2 emission by 70% in Segrate. Regarding the second dimension, instead, climate change mitigation is taken as an opportunity to promote programs of active participation involving experts and non-experts for the co-creation of our sustainable future. In this respect, we have launched several initiatives, such as the International Call for Ideas, involving postgraduate students in the co-design of the Green Kilometer project. Similarly, there is also the CP Lab project, the Centro Parco Lab project, that is a local co-design workshop for high school students to rethink the city's green areas. The impacts of the environmental crisis affect the daily lives of local communities and administrators. As mayors, we are confronted on the front line with the magnitude of natural disasters. As such, we must take the lead in the fight against climate change and step up our commitment to climate action. So I like to join the call made by many in saying that there is really no longer space for debate and speculation. It's just time to be bold and proactive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I like that message very much. Keen to work with as many global covenant mayors and cities as possible, but would encourage that boldness and that proactivity definitely. Also very interesting to hear and to have seen a little more of the co-design work that you mentioned. Again, a strong feature throughout COP26 has been the role of citizen engagement, and that works equally for local government and city administrations as for national government. But some really interesting work that you've set out there, both in engaging with students and the academic community, but more broadly in the Green Kilometre scheme. Thank you for setting all of that out. Next, I'd like to turn to Paolo Bartoldi from the European Commission's Joint Research Centre. Welcome, Paolo, a long-time friend and supporter of the Global Covenant of Mayors, as well as the EU Covenant of Mayors, and indeed co-chair of the Data Technical Working Group for GCOM, and very active in sharing and providing expertise across the network. Paolo, to come to you, please take a few minutes to introduce yourself, the role of the JRC, and then I know you're going to set out a little bit of the impact assessment report of the Covenant of Mayors for Europe. So over to you.
Thank you, Andy. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here in this session with you and the esteemed mayor and the other participant. We at JRC are the scientific body of the Commission, so bear with me some numbers resulting from our analysis of the city results in their participation in the Global Covenant of Mayors, basically in 3 regions: Europe, EU and non-EU countries, Covenant of Mayor Mediterranean or South, which was introduced before by the director of the engineer, and the Eastern Partnership is another important area, so another 6 countries. We have in total 10,600 participating cities, out of which 7,730 have submitted a plan which has been validated, an action plan. Out of these, of course, the majority of them has signed it for the 2020 target, but an increasing share, now standing at 15%, have already committed for the 2030 target. So they have experienced the first journey towards the 2020, achieved the target, and now with enthusiasm they go on to 2030 and in the longer journey towards climate neutrality 2050. The majority of plans at the moment are still dealing with mitigation. Only out of the 7,700 plans, only about 1,000 are dealing with adaptation. Adaptation was added later on, is still challenging to collect data and to plan in particular because it requires a lot of infrastructure investment, but is another trend that we see growing every year. It's important that if we focus on the 2030 mitigation target, that the overall target is 44%. If you just take all these mega regions, if we look only at the EU, the city commit to 47%. With the previous target at EU level being 40%, is showing that the city go beyond what is done by member state, by the EU itself. So the city are very, very taking the lead, I say, to driving the EU economy to become climate neutral towards 2050. And this is a very good sign. If you look at achievement in 2020, the cities in all these regions achieved already 24% reductions. So again, more than 20% that was requested. And while for 2030, they're on track to reach about 37%. So they have to do additional effort. They cannot continue the linear trend from the baseline years to 2020. 2030 is already more challenging, and this is what the message we give to city. You cannot rely on what you've been doing. You have to do more just for the intermediate target 2030. And of course, when you look then at climate neutrality, most probably you have to, again, to change your steepness of your curve and go further down. Very quickly, 1 minute on adaptation, which has been mentioned as very important. The major climate risks that have been identified are flood and sea level rising, heavy precipitation, wildfire, extreme heat, and drought and water scarcity. Of course, we have a very large region, very diverse region, so different risks are there. The risks are predominantly high and medium, and they're expected to increase in intensity. So all the cities are already understanding that the risk will only increase, and they have to take action urgently to be prepared and become more resilient to this risk. Sector impacted are agriculture, forestry, civil protection, emergency, environmental, and biodiversity. In particular, the agriculture is very vulnerable to droughts and water scarcity. And then if we look at the impact on the population, all cities report a very high impact on the elderly population, the low income, and person living in substandard housing. In particular, the elderly are reporting many cities as very vulnerable to extreme heat. And we know this elderly population has already suffered a lot through the COVID pandemic. And therefore, I think there is a moral obligation by civil society really to take care of them and protect them in particular from the result of climate change. Last numbers I would like to give you that we have in the database, summing up all the plans by the cities, an impressive amount of policy and measure, 183,000 for mitigation and 10,000 for adaptation, showing the richness of initiative with very diverse type of measures, policy, engagement of citizens. So really is a huge source of inspiration for all the cities around the world. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you can keep some of the numbers, but very soon we will release all this in a JRC report. Over to you, Andy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was going to ask if the information was already released, but it sounds like it's coming soon. I noted a few of those numbers down. A very impressive and growing number of climate action plans that are working towards 2030, and very interesting to hear how the understanding of particularly vulnerable population groups is growing alongside the submission of that data. Very much take your point about the need to strive for equity in the transition and measures to address climate change, both as far as adaptation as well as mitigation are concerned. And I know that's something that both the Commission and more broadly the Global Covenant are taking on. We'll come back to you shortly for a second round of interventions. Next, I'd like to turn to Serena Mortada, a member of the Executive Board of the Lebanese Center for Energy Conservation. Sorina, welcome. Perhaps you'd like to take a few minutes both to introduce yourself and say a little bit about the state of play in the energy sector in the Southeast Mediterranean region, in particular drawing on the work of the ENI CBC Med project. Over to you.
Thank you, Andy. Well, I am a technical consultant at the Lebanese Center for Energy Conservation, which is the national energy agency for Lebanon. And I will be talking about initiatives such as the ENI CBC Med, which is funded by the European Union, as well as some success stories, maybe in the second round of discussion, and the outcomes of major projects in Lebanon. With regard to your question about the energy sector in the Southeast Mediterranean region, in fact, the energy demand is increasing yearly, like any other region in the globe. It's expected to rise nearly 118% by 2040. Thus, the main target is to ensure, of course, a just transition to shift towards renewable energies and to increase awareness regarding energy efficiency and energy conservation. So these countries can have their own contribution in the global fight against climate change. As you might know, most of the South Med countries have set plans, have set targets, have set objectives to increase the renewable energy shares in their energy mix and to reduce their dependency on fossil fuels. However, despite the huge potential that the region, the Southeast Mediterranean region, have related to renewable energies, and despite the benefits of its exploitations, this region still remains far behind from other regions in the world in terms of solar and wind in general. I believe this paradox is mainly related to the fact that the deployment of renewable energy in the region is facing crucial obstacles
We may have an issue with the internet connection there to Sorina. Let's see if we can get her back and come back. Perhaps then while we're just re-establishing that connection, and we will go back to her to hear the end of that introductory set of remarks about the Southeast Mediterranean region. Let me then turn next to Naguib Amin, the team leader for climate&energy, perhaps to give an introduction on that initiative, on the Covenant of Mayors in the Mediterranean, and talk a little bit about work underway with national authorities and a growing group, currently 120 municipalities on the ground to finance and implement sustainable energy and climate action plans. Over to you, Naguib.
Thank you, Angie. Thank you for this invitation. I'm very happy and very proud, of course, to be here. Climamed is actually built upon several other projects that had started before that. Among them are CESMED, Clean Energy Saving Mediterranean Cities, where we worked with cities as well. The SUDET projects and ClimaSouth. Built on this, we have started the Climamed, which is working on very clear 4 components that are very interactive. The first one of them is to align the national authorities and work out with them in each country the preparation of a national climate action, actually climate mainstreaming actions on that. So through this activity, we create the first step towards a partnership between the national authorities and the local authorities. Together, we prepare those climate action strategies that include as a major part of them how to support local authorities. In parallel, we work with local authorities, meaning with cities, municipalities, regions, and association of cities, coaching them, working closely with their technicians to prepare sustainable energy action plans and climate action plans. So far, we are about to produce within weeks 100 SICAPs of these. I must point out here that working with them, using their tools, their municipal tools, often their language, their technician, is having a huge impact on the use of this plans that I'll just mention it. Thirdly, we work on the financing of climate actions in three different directions. One is pointing out, is working with the national authorities who are dealing with finance on formulating best way to support climate finance on national level, interactively with climate finance on city level. And secondly, is working with the cities themselves through their own resources, either their budget or the finances they can themselves collect from taxes, from attracting private authorities, on implementing the projects that are in the SICAPs themselves, using them as a pilot examples that are replicable. Thirdly, we are working with the international actors, such as the climate funds and the IFIs, to together try to find best ways to support the financing of primarily the SICAPs that we have. With all of this, we have been assigned the task to create the Convent of Mayors for the Mediterranean, which was de facto actually active since we were working with ClimaMed, with SESMED, because we have been building very strong ties with the cities. We have created all the platforms, all is set now. And it has by now 120 members. We expect another 100 to join immediately after preparing the SICAPs, because that was a decision that they prepared. And we have a list of about 389 exactly cities who have clearly expressed their will to join and to embark in preparing the SICAPs. So we basically, with all of this, we have the door opened, and we hope that along the implementation of the C4C, which we will be doing as well, to continue what we have started, principally through the Convent of Mayors, and to continue with this trend. Thank you very much for this very rapid.
Thank you,
Naguib. 3 minutes. Thank you.
No, very good. Thank you very much for sticking to time. Always appreciated as a moderator. I'm very much like your remarks about the door remaining open and continuing to welcome on board new authorities, and the importance of supporting them and working in local conditions, local context, and in many cases in local language as well, and very good to understand the difference that's making in terms of practical implementation. Serena, I think we have you back. If that's the case, I didn't know if you just wanted to finish off then your opening remarks. Let's come back to you for a second.
Yes, and thank you. As I was making a point, it happened. I was going to say that disparities are noticed in the region between some countries to their commitments, while in Lebanon, like what just happened, we need to deploy renewable energy to ensure energy security and electricity security while adhering to our commitments in reducing the emissions. Just a closing remark, with initiatives such as the ENI CBC Med funded projects funded by the EU, we can foster fair, equitable development on both sides of the Mediterranean, which is becoming feasible through this initiative. And these kind of initiatives present key solutions on local, national, and regional level with regard to energy transition in the Southeast Med region. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you so much. And for the last of our round of introductory remarks, I'd like to come to Councillor Joana Presas Pinto de Basmao from the city of Cascais. Say a little bit about yourself, perhaps give a brief introduction, and then I know you want to say a few words around climate and energy and sustainability planning and your 2050 commitment in the Covenant of Mayors, as well as the importance of green and just transition. So over to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you for the invitation to the organizers, and thank you to the co-panelists for the really interesting interventions. So Cascais is a municipality outside Lisbon, about 20 minutes from Lisbon, coastal, 100 square kilometers, 200,000 people. So just, I can locate you, and about a third of our territory is in a national park. Climate action in Cascais. We've been going at it for like 15 years, but only recently did we really start to compile and organize all these different measures and activities. So now recently we've adopted the carbon neutrality roadmap. It's the first municipal one in Portugal. It was really useful in knitting everything together. Actions that were already happening but not really compiled. It was really useful for aiming for higher ambition, and it was really useful also for just comparing or being in sync with EU legislation and with what the Portuguese government is doing. And for this instrument, it's now a guiding instrument. It's actually quite dynamic because we started with the carbon neutrality for 2050. And actually now we're aiming for, we're considering to aim for carbon neutrality in 2030 and to apply to be one of the 100 cities that the European Commission will hopefully select to be on that list. And so this neutrality roadmap focuses on mobility, on waste, on stationary energy, and on land use and forestry. And just one example is on mobility. We have a local transport authority. It's quite recent, and we have free public bus transport for all citizens, students, and people that work in Cascais. So this is major. I mean, mitigation-wise, but also socially. And then on the other side of the coin, there's the adaptation strategy. It's about 4 years old. It was built totally bottom-up, involving the whole structure in the municipality. It involved a lot of new literacy for different departments who really never believed they had anything to do with neutrality, with adaptation and climate change, like urban planning and the health department, for example. And there's 82 measures on that, anything ranging from water creek restoration, which is important for preventing flooding, to measures in the national park to prevent fires, and just communication measures with the health authorities to prevent excessive death rates when there are heat waves. I know my minutes are finishing, so just two messages. One is about how we communicate climate action. We're very keen and wary about the delicate balance of, one thing is reducing CO2 emissions. The other thing is people's, justice, equality, and so social cohesion normally comes first. Second message, cities. Thank you for having this panel dedicated to cities. We are, of course, a member of the Global Covenant of Mayors. You recently received a big prize from a major Portuguese foundation. And I am of the belief that the battle of sustainability will be won or lost in cities, and I can expand on that later. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back to you. There are a couple of questions coming in from the audience, just so you're primed. I think that was a picture of Cascais behind you, and a question immediately about how the ocean and the coastline features in your plan. And then a question that's just come in on how, with that in mind, around cities leading the way, around how we can speed up action. But we'll come back to you during the course of the discussion in just a few moments. But I will come back around to our panel and try to integrate some of the questions that are starting to come in from our audience, and thank you to everybody for those. First of all, back to you, Sorina. We heard there also from Cascais about alignment between local action and national NDCs. What are the main solutions that you're seeing that local actors are implementing on the ground to align local climate action plans from the Southeast Mediterranean region, then with national NDCs?
Actually, and as everyone stated, the targets and objectives are there, and they vary extensively from one region to another. One main theme, which is the importance of renewable energy in local climate plans from both adaptation and mitigation perspectives. So what we need to remind everyone is the important role of local communities. What we have seen till now in the region, and we hope to continue seeing, is based on four main pillars. The first one, as local actions, is the involvement of all citizens within a local community with the whole chain for the implementation of action plans in order to achieve the objectives. The second one is to make demonstration projects with having the public sector as an exemplary role in order to incite everyone for these in the local community to the implementation. The third one definitely is, we have seen this and we have seen its importance, which is the capacity buildings for a sustainable approach on a long term. And the fourth one, which is the fourth pillar, which is the most important one, is the information and awareness raising in a local community by involving and engaging local citizens in the community and visibility plans for this community. What we have seen as concrete actions, for instance, is to install municipal taxes, is to have an urban planning with the green neighborhood approach, is to implement, for instance, local building code requirements in order to incite the engagement of local communities in a bigger target, which is the NDCs, whether on a local level or a larger national level.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for those. And in a similar way, to come to you, Mayor Micheli, what are the challenges and opportunities that are posed by the energy transition in Segrate?
Concerning energy transition, one of our most relevant experiences is Reenergetic, an EU-funded research project on which we are partner in case study. The aim of the project is to study the feasibility and replicability of energy islands, focusing on 3 pilots in Segrate, Ghent, and Poznan. I will say, however, that there are several challenges highlighted by this research. The first challenge is the integration and upscaling of energy island solution within the infrastructure of the cities, as opposed to the new development projects that make the adoption of this solution much easier. In this respect, it's worth noting that most of the European territory is urbanized. Another challenge is related to the regulation and legal framework, starting from the EU directive and Italian legislation. And thirdly, the affordability and accessibility of these solutions. The project is still underway, but we are already observing advancements in knowledge and production for policy design. In fact, there are many opportunities arising from this research project. For instance, we are gaining a better understanding of how to make this transition cost competitive and truly sustainable. Next to this, we are understanding how to make it legally feasible. What is the role of the public and what is the relationship between the public and the private? And last but not least, how to foster a sense of community around energy islands, underlying the cost benefits in terms of social capital together with environmental and economical ones.
Thank you very much for those remarks and just for filling in a little more of the detail. Next, to come back to Paolo and Naguib. Tell us a bit more about the added value of data and science-based targets and actions. And we've had a question about whether there's data available on mitigation actions that have already been delivered and savings that have resulted. I don't know whether either of you are also able to address that one directly, but perhaps to you first, Paolo, tell us a bit about the added value of data and of science-based target and actions.
Thank you, Andy. I think we all face a dilemma because we know that collect data is a burdensome task that we ask to cities. But I think this makes the Covenant of Mayor initiative special because there are not just ordinary claims that come from everywhere to become climate neutral, to do actions, private sector, etc., which are not verified. We know that every city participating in the Covenant Mayor is very serious, committed, and transparent. So release some key data to show the progress, both because our mayors, which take commitment with their stakeholders, the citizens, and also to show that this is real action that delivers. And this is what is very important to highlight. And the numbers they presented before are not just projection. The city they, as a plan, okay, we take for granted. Are numbers coming from the so-called monitoring report. So the regular reports that the city do and collect the data, compile, and send to us, and then it's fed into the global Covenant of Mayor database. The data I presented is available, will be put next week, will be placed on the web. At the moment, it's still the old data. We just finished to clean the data and prepare it, and it's impressive, this data. We know that is a burden for the city, and we try to minimize this burden. And the other important thing that is all cities around the globe report according to the same methodology. We call it common reporting framework from the GCOM. And this is also very important because we can compare cities from Latin America to South Mediterranean to Northern Europe, and they can learn each other. They can see how the progress are going and what are achieving. But it's also important to highlight one last point, that this database is not just a database of number of mitigation and adaptation. As I said, is an impressive database of measures and policies. So it's a great source of inspiration for all the cities around the globe. So I think data are a necessity to make the Covenant of Mayor a very successful initiative that delivers. And we understand sometimes the difficulty of cities, and we try as much as possible to simplify the reporting mechanisms through tools, through training, through sharing the burden among small municipalities. We try to pull them together. And of course, for newcomers, there is a wealth of, as I say, of training tools available on the GCOM website, and a lot of regional and local experts that can always help them. That's all from my side. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you so much. A wealth of information in there, and we look forward to the new data being made available very shortly. To then come to you, Negib, anything additional to add on the value of data and science-based targets and actions? And then we have had one question, maybe if you are able to address it. You mentioned work to look for investment. How are you doing in terms of kind of engaging with the financial sector or potential investors in projects in the region?
Right. Firstly, building on what Paolo just mentioned, in addition to the scientific value of this data, and of course the monitoring value of this data, and indeed, as he said, it was such a painstaking exercise, and we know it very, very well. In fact, the collection of this data and the calculation of the emissions and the results that will come after the project happens to be now a very, very favorable exercise for cities who hated it at the beginning, because it is a scientific tool that not only helps them monitor the climate change emissions, but helps them actually design very meticulous and very coherent plans. You know, they help them do wastewater projects. They help them calculate the data, help them do waste, help them do road calculations. And in fact, it's a tool for urban design in addition to a tool for climate change. And once they understand this, and once we understand it in this way, it becomes, you know, we close the buckle. And although it sounds utopic, but in fact, is a fact that we use the same system built by the GRC, the same model, is itself creates a very coherent tool that can facilitate the learn of know-how from each cities to the other. So as for your question regarding finance, if I may answer now, yes. As we have, to begin with, we identify the projects at, we identify the blockage at national level that hinders climate finance, both at cities level and at centralized level itself. And we formulate with the national authorities responsible for finance recommendations and ways to overcome those obstacles. This is the first thing. Secondly, we have this whole long list of examples of climate pilot projects at the city levels that we use as examples to replicate. In other terms, we have pilot projects on public sectors, how to involve public-private partnerships, how to raise taxes, how to use better use of budget, and so on and so forth. Thirdly, we work with the IFIs from a complete new different angle. We have tried for several years to help solve this major problem about the bankability of the cities. The cities are not usually able to take easily very large loans and make up large projects. And the IFIs, international main funding institutions, are more interested in large sums. So our approach is to try to find in each country an intermediary actor. Usually it is a national bank or a sovereign authority who deals with the IFIs in taking larger sums. For instance, there's a national bank in Jordan who deals with local authorities, who has been able to take sums up to $40 and $50 million at once and redistribute them to cities and support those cities implement the smaller scale projects. So we are working on this level, trying to find, together with the IFIs, innovative ways of downscaling the funds through, as I said, an intermediary national actors, and to have the cities. Next to this, we establish systems to work closely with the cities in funding, implementing, and following up the implementation of this project, including on financial and technical.
Thank you so much. And I really like that idea of starting from the top down and engaging with the international financial institutions to think about then scaling down to reach the city level in the right way. We've sometimes come at things the other way around and looked at aggregating projects from the individual city level from the bottom up, but good to encourage the financial system to think a little bit differently indeed. Next, to come back to Councillor Joanna Balsamel and to Sorina, tell us a little bit about the specific needs of cities in the Mediterranean region and how some of the European-driven initiatives like GCOM Clima-Med and ENI CBC Med are supporting climate action in the region.
Sorina, do you want to go?
No, please go ahead.
Okay, so I'll be more generalistic and then I'm sure you'll be more specific. So I think Mediterranean cities in general will be needing the same things as any city in the world in general terms. And what is that? Training, because civil servants as a workforce, it's been hugely demanding on them, all this new expertise, all this new jargon, and climate literacy is very much needed, but also climate expertise. And this has to be gained in-house. It's not enough to hire consultants because climate change is here to stay. So it really has to be embedded in the structure. Secondly, cities need to share best practices, and this ties in with delivering that was mentioned previously. It creates a domino effect. If I see that a city next door in the next country that is similar to mine has done it, and I understand how they've done it, then I will want to, it's sort of contagious in a good way. I will want to follow suit. And it really is useful in highlighting all the positive collateral effects of any climate action measure, because any measure like I said before, it's not just about fighting climate change. Any climate action measure has collateral effects. So if you're looking at like the Water Creek restorations that I mentioned, of course, it's about preventing floods downstream, but these floods would happen like every 30 years. People don't understand that immediately. Before then, people will understand, oh, this is a nature-based solution. I have nature back and I am in contact with nature and I can cycle and walk. And there is less pollution also flowing down to the sea. Okay, so this is the second, sharing best practice and highlighting the externalities. Financing is the third. And then the fourth is, of course, monitoring and the data tools that you mentioned. Of course, this all ties in together, and both ClimaMed and the Covenant, they will bring to cities these 4 dimensions. So I think Serena can be more specific about what happens in the Mediterranean basin. Portugal is, normally we say we're Atlantic by location and Mediterranean by nature. But I think Serena is the best place to comment on this.
No, great. Serena, we're starting to run out of time, and we do want to come back to one more question in the word cloud if we can, but very quickly, anything to complement?
Yes, actually, there are 3 levels to work on. The first one, which is the implementation, currently is being done through 2 projects for EN funded under the program ENICBC-MED. The first one is it's about building information modeling in the renovation of historic buildings. It allows to prepare the ground for energy performance contracting to allow public entities to implement energy measures. The second one, which is SMS project, is leading the development of actions at the level of public schools, starting from awareness raising through competition for the next generation, which are the children now. Of course, with the second aspect, which is the technical aspect, through capacity building and energy teams, as well as monitoring and installing energy meters. What I want to say at last is to respond to a certain regulatory framework. For instance, one of the previously funded projects under ENPI-CBC-MED Desire, 2 major outputs have been used now. The first one is to have a set of mandatory standards for solar PV in Lebanon, and the second one, which is on a level, very local level, which is the Directorate of Urban Planning, is to enforce the solar ordinance on the obligation of installing solar water heaters in new buildings as well as heat pumps. All these projects are being as well capitalized on in a new launched project, which is the CCAP for SDG, with a spirit of a whole integration approach through uniform adapted assessment and financing methods, mainly targeting buildings in education and health sectors. So all these projects would respond to the city's needs from a regulatory point to an implementation point of view, as well as the capacity building and awareness raising. Over to you, Andy.
Thank you so much. And you've helped answer one question that came in from our audience about how the urban planning system could use or feature. But as you've mentioned there, building codes and regulations can play an important role. And that new project that's just starting up sounds like it will make a valuable contribution in linking the urban planning system then to the delivery of goals for climate action planning. So thank you very much to the questioner for that one. Sylvia, just to come to you very quickly, I know you've been helping to look at and prepare the word cloud. What's been coming in from our audience, and anything that you'd like to say very quickly about that?
Yes, thank you so much. So here on the screen, you can see the answer from the attendees to the question, what element is crucial, according to you, to enhance climate and energy transition in Europe and the Mediterranean? And it's, as you can see, some of the keywords that have been shared by our speakers are appearing here on the screen, with the big cooperation at the core, which I think it's a great message to close the session. Andy, over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to everybody who contributed to that, as you saw there, that idea of cooperation very strong. We've heard about new projects that are starting up, new data that's becoming available, new ways of thinking and working with financiers to attract finance into the sector, new thinking in terms of the way that individual cities are approaching both co-design and the preparation of increasing of ambition in their climate action planning going forward. So please keep an eye out for that new data that's coming available. Take the opportunity to then look at the website for the Global Covenant, to then get access to the website for the Mediterranean Regional Covenant. Take an opportunity to reach out to the speakers and get in touch. My massive thanks to all of our panelists for the valuable contributions to the preparation that's gone into today, to the European Commission for the ongoing support for this work and for hosting us through this session. I wish you a good evening or good night or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. And please do enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.